The year is 1909. American Tobacco Company decides to take advantage of baseball stars by putting baseball cards into their packs of cigarettes. The result, this 1909 T206 Honus Wagner, the most famous sports card in existence. On today's episode of the Cardboard Chronicles, it's 1909 to 1911 T206. Hey guys and gals, it's Mr. Hollywood and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Chronicles, where we go over a famous card or set in the history of time, talk about why that set or that card became so popular, which cards hold the most value, and what were some of the stories behind why these cards became iconic. On today's episode, we have the infamous 1909 to 1911 T206 baseball cards produced by American Tobacco Company. Of course, these were cards put into packs of cigarettes and contained one of the two most famous cards in the history of the hobby. Of course, I'm talking about the 1909 T206 Honus Wagner card right there. But baseball was really solidifying itself as America's pastime by this point, and ATC, American Tobacco Company, saw a chance to capitalize on that by putting baseball cards into their product in order to sell more of it. A lot of baseball players at the time were endorsing cigarettes or used tobacco, but the cards had a whole bunch of different backs on them, depending on which brand of cigarette you bought. So not all these cards are created equal in brand or value. There were 16 different brands that were represented on the back of these things, sort of like in an advertisement style print. So you can see on your screen now some examples of the more popular ones, like Sweet Caporal, Piedmont, Old Mill, Polar Bear, Drum, and Lennox are two of the very rare ones. You get the picture. So you see here on the back, this one, for example, Piedmont. Just so we're clear, guys, the cards you see on the table are not the authentic T206 cards. These are all the CCC Monster reprint of these cards from 1988. If I actually had these cards on my desk, they would be worth tens and tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. But so we all know the Honus Wagner card, but aside from the Wagner, what made this set so intriguing and why is it so valuable and hard to collect outside of price? So the set consisted of a staggering 524 cards. That is an awful lot, number one. It had a mix of minor leaguers and major leaguers. I think there was around 100. I think around 100 of these 524 cards in the set were minor leaguers, which made it one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse set of its time. And because the set was so big, it actually ended up being nicknamed the Monster for obvious reasons. It's a monster big set. But the set happened to coincide with the golden age, essentially, of early baseball and kind of captured the essence of early 20th century America, you could say. Kind of a trip back in time seeing these portraits and these photos. But fun fact, it was actually this set that was written about by a man by the name of Jefferson Burdick that ended up laying the foundation for modern card collecting and classification. He wrote a whole book about it. But back to the cards, each one of these is a small piece of art, essentially. At this point, they have this vibrant lithograph of a player with a white border. The set actually used to just be called the white border set. I know that sounds like, it sounds funny that would be the name of the set, but it was at one point known as the white border set, with the simple player last name and team at the bottom. You can see there on the bottom there the name of Wagner, last name, and team Pittsburgh. So pretty simple cards, honestly. All of them except for 6 of the 524 cards are in a vertical orientation like this. There are 6 that are horizontal. But in this set, we generally have what are known as the big 4 cards that comprise this set. Ironically, 3 of them are big just because they're error cards. but we're gonna take a look at them right now. Of course, I'm gonna talk first and foremost about the Honus Wagner portrait right here, the Eddie Plank, which is right here, the Sherry McGee, which is right here, and the Joe Doyle. We'll also take a look at Cy Young, Christy Mathewson, Ty Cobb, a few other valuable ones from this set. But let's start with the big daddy of them all, the fabled Honus Wagner yellow portrait card. This card, even in its worst condition, is worth millions of dollars. The highest graded version is the former Gretzky owned card, which ended up grading a PSA 8. It's now the highest graded Wagner card in the world. It's owned by the owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks. I think that copy is worth probably 40 to 50 million. I think closer to 50 million in my opinion, because at the end of the day, it's probably a billionaire buying that, and when you're throwing around that kind of money, what's an extra 10, 15 million, right? But why is even a PSA 1 worth millions? So our last big sale was in 2022, and SGC 2 of this card went for $7.25 million in a private sale with Golden. That was in 2022. So that graphic also says most expensive card ever sold. Well, at the time it was, but it has since been surpassed by a 52 Topps Mickey Mantle and an SGC 9.5 that did 12.6 million shortly thereafter. Now there are a few theories as to why this Wagner card is so scarce and believed to have only 50 to 200 copies even make it into existence of these cigarette packs. Some people think it's closer to 50 that made it in. Some people think it's closer to 200. Who knows what the actual number is? We'll never know. But the first theory is that the Honus Wagner printing plate for the set broke very early on. But most people would agree that Honus Wagner was such an important player, such a great player at the time, that they would have just remade the plate. So most people agree that that probably wasn't the cause. Theory number 2 is that there was actually a copyright dispute between ATC and the artist who created the lithograph for the Wagner card. Although I personally am not too sure about it myself, honestly. But theory 3 is that Honus Wagner decided to have his card pulled out of the set because he didn't want to endorse the use of tobacco products to children. While most people agree that that is probably the cause, I'm not so sure. You see, Honus Wagner was an avid proponent, for the most part, of using tobacco. He was an avid tobacco chewer. His image appeared on cigar boxes and other tobacco-related products before 1909, so why now? Like, even in his 1948 Leaf baseball card, it shows him holding a pack of cigarettes, I think in his left hand, holding a piece of chewing tobacco, kind of raising it to his mouth in his right hand, and then a bulge in his cheek because he is chewing tobacco. He has a cheek full of tobacco in that photo. So either he changed his mind really quickly, or in my opinion, just didn't feel like he was getting paid enough or compensated enough for the use of his image in this set and thus had the card removed. Either way you choose to believe, well, we'll never know, let's be honest. But 2, what makes this card so fascinating and rare? That's what makes this card so fascinating and rare. But what were the other big cards of the Monster T206 set? Let's take a look at the Eddie Plank. This one is rare because there was an issue with the printing plate, so that actually led to a low number of cards produced. Like I said earlier, some people thought the Wagner card could have had a printing plate issue. This one actually did have a printing plate issue, we know that for a fact. This card did $690,000 in 2018 in a PSA 7. So safe to say in that grade or higher, this could very well be $1 million+ card today. Probably is. Next, let's look at the Sherry McGee printing error card. Of course, his last name is spelled M-A-G-I-E on this error card. His actual last name is spelled M-A-G-E-E. They did fix that, so this card does exist in the set properly spelled, although this one, this error card, did $660,000 in a PSA 8 in 2018 as well, and just like the Plank, I think that's probably closer to $1 million now. So the McGee error card, and lastly of the big four, let's take a look at Joe Doyle. Joe Doyle is also valuable because of a printing error. You can see on the bottom of the card there, it says NY National. But he actually never played for the New York Giants. They actually confused Joe Doyle with Larry Doyle, who did play for the New York Giants. Thus, that was an error. Only about 10 of these have surfaced on the planet Earth, with the last known sale of this being an SGC 3.5, which did like, I want to say $1.3 million in 2023. So that is another very rare card in this set. But who are the Hall of Famers you know about that are also in this set? There's a whole bunch of them, but let's go with Ty Cobb, okay? Ty Cobb, I can't hold 4 cards in my hand at once, is this whole row right here. This whole row is Ty Cobb's from T206. He has 4 cards in this set. His red back right here, his green back, his bat on shoulder, which is this one here, as well as his bat off shoulder, which is right here. It's the bat off shoulder that is the most valuable, clocking in at $186,000 in 2023. The green portrait here sold in a PSA 8 for $488,000 in 2023, and the red one here in the same PSA 8 condition did $252,000 in 2023 as well. Next, let's look at, and we're not gonna get to all of these cards. There's just so many big cards in this set. But let's look at Cy Young. Of course, Cy Young had the Cy Young Award named after him for the best pitcher in baseball, but he had 3 cards in this set. You can see him here, 1, 2, 3. This is the Cy Young green back, green portrait. We have the Cy Young bare hand and the Cy Young with mitt here. But the green portrait here did $106,000 in 2021, with the bare hand being worth about half that in similar condition, probably. This being the bare hand. You do the one with the glove as well. All 3 of these cards, totally iconic. But next, let's take a look at Christy Mathewson. These are the Christy Mathewsons here down on the bottom. You have the white cap, you have the dark cap, and then you have the portrait. But it's the portrait, this one right here, it is the portrait that does the most damage to your wallet, to the tune of $63,000 for an SGC 8 in January of 2024. The dark cap version, which is this one here, the dark cap did $21,000 in a PSA 7, while the white cap did $30,000 in a PSA 7 as well. So all 3 of these very valuable cards as well. There's countless other priceless cards from this set. Of course, Tris Speaker here. Walter Johnson has some crazy cards in this set. I think the highest graded Walter Johnsons they're 6-figure cards as well. Of course, we have, I mean, there's just so many. There's just so many to go through. I mean, you got Evers, you got Chance, Bender, Keeler. These are all huge cards from this set. A few more Tinkers, another Ever. There's a LaJoie. I mean, just absolute legends of the game. All worth tens of thousands of dollars to 6 figures in high grade. So again, to recap, probably the most valuable set of all time came around when America's pastime baseball was really gaining in popularity. It really kind of captured the imaginations of America and had some of the most iconic early players of all time. Keep in mind, most people who collect this set collect 520 of the 524 cards. and not necessarily all in super high grade because of the insane cost that it would take to complete this full set of 524. Like we talked about before, you want to get the Wagner, the Plank, the McGee, and the Doyle. I mean, you're probably looking at minimum $5-6 million just for those 4. So most people try and complete 520 of the 524 and just say like, all right, you know, those 4 are just kind of unattainable. But talk about a complete set that's truly unobtainable for most people. This one makes 1952 Topps look like a cakewalk to collect. It makes 1952 Topps price tag look like the biggest bargain of all time. You can complete an entire set of 52 Topps in the low six-figure range. But that'll do it for me here at Hollywood Rips for today's episode of the Cardboard Chronicles. Hope you enjoyed today's look back in time at the 1909 to 1911 T206 monster set. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and comment below and subscribe to the channel. It really is appreciated if you choose to do so. So until next time, my friends, from here at Hollywood Rips, Mr. Hollywood, out.